United Way Mass Bay is determined to make an impact, to inspire communities to be the very best versions of themselves. They listen to the voices that can actually make that happen. Community leaders, educators, and the neighbors that live, work, and thrive in these places. Those are the voices that matter, and those are the voices that United Way Mass Bay listens to. And because they're listening, they're creating a new kind of philanthropy. See what's new at unitedwaymassbay.org/what's new.
I'm Dumcius, and this is the Codcast, Commonwealth Beacon's podcast about policy and civic life here in Massachusetts. Today, I'm joined by John Deaton, the Republican running against Senator Elizabeth Warren. They're both on the ballot this November. John Deaton is a U.S. Marine veteran. He survived cancer. He's the father to 3 daughters. He's an attorney who is specialized in cryptocurrency. He also authored his own book that detailed his life growing up in extreme poverty. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for that. It was a good win. 3 people were on the ballot for the primary, and yet I still got 65% of the vote, which is uncommon. But I didn't get in this race to win the primary. I got in the race to defeat Elizabeth Warren. We have multiple crises, immigration, debt, housing, inflation, foreign wars. But the greatest crisis is a crisis of leadership. And I think that someone like me, who's not a partisan person, I've been a Democrat, I've been a Republican, I've been independent. I think that someone like me needs to go to the Senate to represent regular people, and that's why I'm in the race.
What made you register as a Republican in Massachusetts? Especially, it's Massachusetts. It's a lot of big tents in both parties. But yeah. What made you register as a Republican?
Well, I belonged to the college Republicans when I was in college. I had a mullet, so I looked like I should belong to the progressives, but I belonged to the college Republicans, and I've been a fiscally conservative centrist, central-leaning right person. I was a registered independent for a while. And when you look at the parties, I think that, you can point to maybe one person in the Republican Party that is part of causing division and all of that. But when you look at the Democrat Party, I think that there's too many of it going to left. And so I think what we need is someone who is a socially moderate to liberal person who is fiscally conservative. The debate was just the other night, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked, that the debt crisis in this country wasn't even raised. $35 trillion in debt. Personal credit card debts at $1.14 trillion with delinquencies rising to all-time highs. Student loan debts at $1.7 trillion. We pay $3 billion a day in interest on our debt. We're going off a cliff. And yet we've got these career politicians on both sides, mind you. Senator Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and the Republicans, they just point the finger at each other, blame each other, engage in divisiveness, pit American versus American. And I think it's just time. I think that's why I got 65% of the vote, despite not being a Trump supporter in a Republican primary, because people were like, hey, I think common sense is a pretty good idea. And I think that's why Senator Warren is struggling to run against me already when she's being asked about me, because it's hard to argue against common sense.
So it was striking to me in my inbox later that night, the state GOP put out a statement which was essentially, make America great again. It was whatever former President Trump said on the stage. And then you put out a statement separately saying it confirmed for me why I'm not voting for either one of them. Right. Can you delve a little bit into why, or
Sure.
Was there anything specific? I mean, I know you mentioned the lack of talk about the debt, but was there anything else that kind of?
Well, personal attacks, a lot of what Senator Warren's doing. For example, when I first announced, even though I've been a centrist all my life, Senator Warren lied and called me a MAGA extremist Republican. It caused Fox Business to do a segment. Why is she lying about this guy? Like, he's not that. He's not an extremist. She's the extremist in this race. And so it's that finger pointing. It's not really dealing with these serious issues. And I'm using my platform. Obviously, President Trump lost Massachusetts, by 33 points last time. And I'm using this platform to say enough is enough. We've got to stop with which one is the lesser of two evils. And if you're not going to support policies that lift people up out of poverty and expand the middle class, I'm not going to support you. And so I believe I'm taking the actual stand. I believe my position is actually the more courageous position. Instead of being forced into this choice, I get to say, look, I explained this to people before. Senator Warren's policies don't help poor people like I grew up with. And I tell to people, if you think there's a big difference, if you think poor people think was a big difference between George W. Bush and Barack Obama, then you don't know poor people and you don't understand poverty, because there really isn't. Senator Warren talks about the wealth gap every year. Wealth gap goes up every year. Her policies are doing nothing for it. It's just all rhetoric. I had a motto in my life because I grew up in that dangerous neighborhood. At some point in my young childhood, I developed this motto of no fear. I mean, you have fear, but that you overcome that fear. And that's what's guided me in my life. I'm actually got in this race out of fear. I fear the American dream's dying. I fear that a kid in Roxbury or Mattapan or Springfield or Brockton will not have the opportunity that I had. I fear that I might be one of the last poor people in this country to make it out of the ghetto and achieve the American dream. I fear I have a 5-year-old. What is America going to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I literally just went and had a coffee, a medium coffee and a muffin. It was $7.45. And I hit that. I went to the grocery store and 4 sticks of butter cost almost $8. Like, that's almost $2 a stick of butter. And I'm sitting there saying, how are people affording this?
So I want to get back to, though, in terms of the, I mean, those are the choices on the ballot. Are you saying you're going to blank the ballot?
I'm going to write in a name, someone that probably embodies unity, not division, somebody who understands that we have to bring each other together, because I don't believe the 2 presidential candidates we have, I all I do is see finger pointing. And
so
all
can
I
I
do
ask who that is? Is that...
I haven't thought that hard on it, but the first name that comes to mind for me would be someone like Charlie Baker, right? A governor here. He was a Republican, 70% approval rating, which includes Democrat approval rating. Somebody who obviously worked across the aisle to try to solve problems. Someone who was socially moderate, fiscally conservative. Someone like that.
I mean, it's fair to say that he also, he left office, as he was facing a challenge from the Trump right. Mm-hmm. My understanding is he likely weighed a run for independent. Part of the question is, when you were thinking about running against Senator Warren, did the thought of running as an independent cross your mind, or? Well,
I mean, here's the reality. I was a registered independent. Listen, I'm a proud, traditional, fiscally conservative, socially moderate Republican. Let me make that clear. I'm proud of that. We live in a 2-party system. I wish that we had a 3-party system that was viable. But, I'm trying to run a race against a 12-year incumbent Democrat senator who has not just the incumbency, but has lots of money. And she's a national person. And so as an independent, unless you can self-fund like a Michael Bloomberg did, or unless you have incredible name recognition, let's say a Mark Wahlberg or someone like that from Massachusetts, it's really not a viable way to try to actually win. But, I actually bring something to the table to Massachusetts that it won't have, that it hasn't had for decades. Elizabeth Warren does not give Massachusetts a real voice in the Senate. She's just another partisan person from the other side. As a Republican in a divided Senate, because that's her number one argument against me. She's never criticized my policies. Again, common sense is hard to argue against. But she says, well, in a 50-50 Senate, we don't want the Republicans to gain control. That's actually the number one reason to vote for me. Because I'm not loyal to a party. I'm not loyal to an agenda. I'm not loyal to a person. I'm loyal to Massachusetts and my country that I love. And so if it's good for Massachusetts and America, I don't care who the president is. If it's Vice President Harris, I want it to be good for Massachusetts and America. I'll be the biggest fighter for it. If it's Donald Trump, same thing. If it's not, I won't. And so, Senator Warren's out there, for example, she literally said that if you vote for me, it will make a federal ban on abortion back in play. I'm pro-choice. I actually could guarantee you that won't happen. Because if abortion comes up, who do you think I'm going to caucus with? If my party tries to put forth a federal ban that I will die fighting, I'll caucus with the Democrat. I won't hesitate to do it. And so we need someone like that. I could actually be the most meaningful vote in the United States Senate because I can't be bought by party. I'm not loyal to a party. And I think that is something that should appeal to most voters, including Democrats.
So you're saying once you get in there, you're not going to say you're going to caucus with the Republicans, or I guess that gets back to, we do have independents, right? You've got Bernie Sanders, Vermont, I believe Angus King in Maine, right?
Right.
So again, it's just kind of, these folks are independents, and Massachusetts voters seem to take into account, or at least they have in past elections, that argument that a Republican vote. To your point, I get what you're saying, but some voters say it's different. We'll vote for Charlie Baker, but we'll also vote for Elizabeth Warren. There was a lot of split-ticket voting going on in 2018.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be a lot of split-ticket voting for John Deaton. I'm going to have people who are voting for Trump vote for me, and people who are voting for Vice President Harris voting for me. You could even look at publicly. I have Anthony Scaramucci and Mark Cuban supporting me. They are adamant Vice President Harris supporters. And I think that that's the point. The point is, who is the better candidate, regardless of party? Some people have become so attached to what a Republican means or what a Democrat means, and I reject that. I think it's sad that if someone were to say, here is a policy, and then be able to absolutely predict what the politician is going to support, yay or nay, just based on the R or the D, right? And so my job is to show and to prove to voters that that's not who I am. I haven't been a partisan person all my life. I'm not going to go to the Senate and all of a sudden get brainwashed. Mitch McConnell or these Republican leadership, I've been more critical of them than Senator Warren in many ways. My criticism has been equal. It's been equal to the far left extremes and the far right extremes. But there's nobody going to tell John Deaton what to do when he gets to the Senate, except for the voters of Massachusetts and my conscience to my country. Those are the only things that are going to guide me. And so, am I an independent thinker? Yes. But I am a Republican, again. And I hate labels. Unfortunately, we've gotten this world where, MAGA means a certain thing. Rhino means a certain thing. I faced this in the primary. MAGA versus Rhino. John's just a rhino, or what's this mean and that mean? I'm just an American who loves his country. And that's what will guide me. Sometimes I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I feel like the candidate that nobody wants, but the candidate that everybody needs. This is the world we lived in. Before the primary, someone asked me what I thought about the cases against Trump, the fraud case with his real estate and then the criminal conviction. And I said I thought it was BS. It was politically motivated. Hillary Clinton was fined $113,000 for classifying the Russian dossier as legal expense. He got a felony conviction. I just said it was motivated. It may be guilty, but it was all politically motivated. And people started yelling at me, you Trump supporter, you're disgusting, you cultist. Then I went into a Republican town committee, and I disclosed that I'm not supporting Trump. You disgust me, you're crazy, you're part of the problem. And so I walked out of there saying, wow, have we just become so tribalistic that if you don't appeal to, that one tribe's complete philosophy, that therefore you're the bad guy? And I think that most people aren't like that. I think we're ready for someone to come to the table to say, hey, sometimes Democrats got a point. Sometimes Republicans got a point. And they vote their conscience. And, we're going to find out. I think people are ready for that in Massachusetts. And we're going to find out if I'm right or not.
I do want to touch on kind of the path to victory, right? There's very much kind of the campaigning, but what is your path to victory? What areas are you focused on? Because in Massachusetts, there's these deep blue cities that will, if there's a D next to the person's name, they will vote for that. What is your path to victory?
Well, listen, a successful campaign comes down to three things: money, message, and work ethic. The message is there. Immigration, the migrant crisis in Massachusetts, we're ground zero. Inflation, we're the second most expensive state to live now. We beat out California, only behind Hawaii. The message is all over there, screaming common sense approach, nonpartisanship. Senator Warren can out-gaslight me. She can outraise me with money. She can't outwork me. It's never been done. It's not going to be done. So it all comes down, can I get enough money to get my name out there and people learn about me? There was a poll last year that showed that if Charlie Baker, a former Republican, were to run against Elizabeth Warren, it's not close. He beats her by 15 points. She came in third when she ran for Democratic president here. Bernie beat her, so did Biden. She has a 41% approval rating. She's passed one bill in 12 years out of 300 and some. She's accomplished hardly nothing. When Charlie Baker needed money for the bridges, the Cape Cod bridges, nowhere to be found. When the infrastructure bill gave $110 billion to bridges across the United States, Massachusetts didn't get any, right? So Senator Warren has been absent for Massachusetts. She objected to President Biden's 2,500 cap per day on migrants because she doesn't see that it's really impacting the Commonwealth the way it is. So when you take all that, you see why someone with Governor Baker's name and reputation crushes her in a race. Now, that doesn't directly translate to me. I'm not Governor Baker. I don't have that kind of name recognition and reputation. But I believe if I can reach enough people, they will. And I think if you look at the 65%, that doesn't happen that often with three people in the race. And one of them was a devout Trump supporter. I lost. He got 24%. I lost 1 out of 4 Republicans in the primary because of my position or lack of support for President Trump. But also, 64% of registered voters, this is what shocks most people outside of Massachusetts, 64% are independents. They're unenrolled. And Senator Warren, 6 years ago, had 55% of independents. Polling is starting to show that she has 33%. That's 23 points off the number one group of people in this state. If I get all those votes, I win. Now, I'm not going to probably get them all, but if I get the vast majority of those independent votes, you're looking at the next senator of Massachusetts.
I do want to touch on crypto. It's a part of your biography. I know it's not the only part of your biography. I think for a lot of folks who might not have been following this, they don't know what crypto is. And,
sure.
and it seems to be, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhat of a libertarian idea. How do you define crypto and how does it work?
Well, let me tell you the personal journey real quick. I heard about Bitcoin, so I read the Bitcoin white paper. I immediately thought of my mom. My mom couldn't afford to keep the minimum deposit in the bank because we need the money each month. She'd go below the minimum deposit. They hit her with a fee. So if you ever go to the inner city, you'll see these stores that says check cashing. And it also says lotto, and it says liquor, and it says all those things, right? Well, I watched my mom beg people, in tears, can you please take $10 instead of $20 from my welfare check? We need it to eat. And then I would listen to my mom cry on the nights that we couldn't eat. And so when I sent her money, they take 10, 15%. When I sent her money through Western Union when I got to college to help her with my 2 siblings, they would take 12%. So I thought, wow, you can cut out the banks, you can cut out the middlemen, and you could use Bitcoin and use crypto. So that's my personal journey. But I just want you to know and your listeners to know that Senator Warren's the crypto candidate in this election, not me. I'm talking immigration, debt, opioid addiction, foreign wars, inflation. Why did she, when she announced her reelection, focus on building an anti-crypto army? Why did she focus on banning Bitcoin in America? Because that's what her latest bill does, if you actually read it and you understand the technology. And so
she's not taking crypto donations, though. I mean, that's right. I mean, that's
Vice President Harris is taking crypto donations. John Deaton's taking crypto. And this is what's crazy about this country. Vice President Harris is running for president and leading a lot of polls. She uses Coinbase Commerce to accept crypto. So does John Deaton. So does President Donald Trump. The SEC, with Elizabeth Warren's support, sued Coinbase 2 years after granting it an IPO, claiming it's an illegal operation. So just imagine that. You have a person running for president. Both people running for president are accepting donations from a platform that Elizabeth Warren and her friends say is an illegal operation. It's nonsense.
I mean, Warren Buffett's not a big fan either. I mean,
well, here's the thing. Well, talk less than 1% of crypto. You can fact check me. All right, less than 1% of crypto is used for illicit criminal activity. Hamas actually issued a directive, stop using crypto. It's too traceable, because Bitcoin and crypto is a public distributed ledger. It's an open ledger. You can see every single transaction from the beginning of time. And so it's very traceable. FBI, CIA, NSA have all said they hope criminals use Bitcoin and crypto. You'd have to be a moron to do that in a public ledger. And the government, United States government, is the fourth largest holder of Bitcoin. You want to know why? Because they confiscated it because of criminals when they did use it, but less than 1%. You ever think an ATM's ever been used in a drug situation? Yes. Do we ban ATM machines?
What are your feelings on U.S. currency then? Is it in terms of? I mean, the U.S. dollar is a sign of strength, right? So it's
yes.
What's you're not saying?
No, it's the opposite. When I get to the Senate, I get to educate these senators because, as you know, all my crypto work has been pro bono. I've never made a dollar as an attorney.
Have you made crypto money off it? Or?
Well, I own crypto, so I've disclosed that I own Bitcoin and I own crypto.
But when you say pro bono, you don't mean you were paid in crypto?
No, I wasn't paid anything. Crypto, money, gold, anything. I did it pro bono because the SEC was hurting regular individual token holders, and I sued the SEC, and a lifelong Democratic judge appointed Barack Obama agreed with me and cited my legal work for free. I'm someone who wants regulation of this industry. I fought for it. I'm founder of crypto law. You can use stablecoin to actually increase demand for U.S. dollars and bolster its dominance in the world and secure for the foreseeable future that it's the world's reserve currency. So what we do is we take technology, we protect consumers for sure, and then we enact legislation that will develop that. The point about Bitcoin, though, is Elizabeth Warren went on Meet the Press and said she thinks Bitcoin is a bad investment. Okay, don't invest in it. But don't tell me to not invest in it. Don't tell you if you want to put 1% of your wealth in it just as a hedge against printing money. Don't tell the rest of us that we can't. You know what I mean? And so it's more about freedom than it is crypto to me. People ask me, am I pro-crypto? I say, no, I'm pro-freedom.
I know we're approaching time, so I did want to ask kind of as a last thing.
Sure.
I'm always kind of fascinated by media diets. Like, what do people consume? You know, where do they go? Daily, weekly? What's the top of your reading list? Websites, news outlets? Do you watch a lot of TV or?
I don't watch a lot of TV, and it's obviously the Globe and the Herald. I can't say I buy them, but I have digital subscriptions to them. I have an active X account. I don't necessarily believe everything that I read at first because I will double check it, and I watch the news.
You don't believe that people are eating cats and dogs, presumably?
No, I mean, are there people out there claiming that? Sure, but that doesn't mean it's true. But right now, I get up in the morning and my campaign sends me like the news to make sure I'm up to date on what's happening. If something happened in the Middle East or something.
Well, I guess, what do you read for fun? Is there? Obviously we all read stuff for work, but what do you read for fun?
Well, I started. I haven't even come close. I think I'm only into the first 15 pages. A line of the Senate. It's about Ted Kennedy, and the reason I did that, even though Ted Kennedy and I probably differ on some of our policy positions, no one could deny that Ted Kennedy didn't love Massachusetts and gave Massachusetts a voice in the Senate. And so I started reading that. Other than that, what I do for fun, to be honest with you, is I hang out with my pigs, my chickens. I'm about to get a goat, and my dog. I'm a huge animal lover. Have been since I was a child. Don't let this look fool you. You're talking about someone who cried for 30 minutes over his duck when his duck died. So I spend a lot of my time with that. And I have a 5-year-old, so I'm reading a lot of kids' books right now.
Same. I have a 2.5-year-old, so there's a lot of the floor is littered with all sorts of books on.
Yes.
I know I said last question. I did want to ask about, because you raised Ted Kennedy, do you view him as a model?
Certainly, the voice he gave Massachusetts and the voice in the Senate. He was, I could tell you this: those bridges would have got money a long time ago if Ted Kennedy was sitting in the Senate today.
He did operate in a different, he was friends with Orrin Hatch, but it was a very different environment. It was very, he died in 2009, which was before Trump, before.
It's just like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Ardent disagreements about policy. You know what I mean? And that's why I haven't done anything personal against Senator Warren. You notice I said I think she started off with good intentions. There was an article from the paper here that said John Deaton sounds a lot like Elizabeth Warren sometimes, because I talk about income equality and I talk about some of these social issues. We can agree on where we want to be and we could disagree on the path that one should take. I think I have a better path than Senator Warren. I think hers is more about divisiveness, class warfare, pitting, rich versus poor and all that kind of stuff. And I think you can lift people up without tearing other people down. I really do. And I think that message will resonate.
I do want to let you say, if there's anything I haven't asked about that you want to add, I always like to give the opportunity.
Well, I know this is shameful, but remember I told you that a successful campaign comes down to money, message, and work ethic. So if I could just simply say, if there's anybody out there that believes in what I'm saying, John Deaton for Senate is how they can get involved.
Thanks again to John Deaton for joining me on the Codcast, and thank you for listening. I'm Dumcius, our producer is Claire Wigglesworth, and please leave a rating or review wherever you're hearing this right now. Email codcast@commonwealthbeacon.org if you ever want to get in touch with us directly. And this week, we're going to be recording a live episode of the Codcast about ballot questions. Why we have them, do they work, who pays for them. I'll be hosting a panel on the history of ballot questions and the drama around some of the well-known campaigns. My colleague Jennifer Smith and MassInc Polling Group President Steve Cozzella will be talking about the polling numbers behind the ballot questions. It's happening at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, September 18th at the West End Museum. Head on over to commonwealthbeacon.org to get free tickets. We'd love to see you there.